History is written in ink and blood, but some chapters are written in fire. Beijing, May 30th, 1626, 9 a.m. The morning was unusually still, eerily quiet, the heart of the world's most powerful empire. Thousands went about their day unaware. Then the ground began to ripple. It started as a low groan from the deep earth. Animals fled. The air grew heavy with static. Then the skies simply vanished. A roar heard over 150 miles away. This was the Wanggongchang Explosion, an event of a magnitude that defies 17th century physics. It produced a force comparable to 20,000 tons of TNT.
Not an atomic blast, but a chemical catastrophe of similar scale. In an instant, 20,000 people were erased.
Some were found miles away, completely naked, their clothes stripped by a freak atmospheric vacuum. How did a black powder store trigger a city-level apocalypse? Today we examine the evidence of a 400-year-old anomaly. We look at the corruption that turned an armory into a bomb. We follow an emperor running for his life through falling debris. And we analyze the bodies that literally fell from the clouds. This isn't just a legend. It is a forensic nightmare. To understand the explosion, we must see the state of the empire. At the center of the rot stood Wei Zhongshan. Under his shadow, the Wanggongchang armory became a maze of neglect. Years of mismanagement had turned the city's defense into its doom. We are going back to that fateful morning, to the moment the mandate of heaven was shattered. Records call it the Great Beijing Explosion, but the survivors called it the end of the world. The facts are impossible. To understand the blast, we must look at the Wanggongchang district. It wasn't just a residential area. It was the empire's magazine. Known as the Royal Industrial Plant, it was the birthplace of the Ming's most lethal technology. Here, the military refined fire medicine, the 17th century term for gunpowder. By 1626, the plant held an enormous stockpile of high-grade black powder. Records describe a massive surplus, intended for the northern frontiers. But behind these walls, the mandate of heaven was rotting. Under the eunuch Wei Zhongshan, the armory became a symbol of decay. Safety funds were embezzled. The facility was a fire hazard, wrapped in silence. Yet the earth itself seemed to know what was coming. Days before the disaster, strange omens began to surface. Chroniclers recorded a pillar of cloud rising from the south. Animals in the Forbidden City began to scream in panic. Some reported will-o'-the-wisps dancing on the armory gates. Then came the earth groan, a sound like grinding metal. Beijing sat on a fault line, a detail that would later become central to the debate. The temperature in the district reportedly began to rise. Inside the armory, the chemical stability was likely failing. Whether it was heat or a spark, the countdown had started. 2 hours to the event. The city begins to wake up. Hundreds of laborers and officials were already inside the plant. A strange sulfurous mist began to choke the streets. The morning air felt thick, like a storm that wouldn't break. Survivors later recalled the great silence that preceded the roar. This wasn't just a fire. Something was happening to the air itself. At 9 a.m., a flash appeared at the center of the district. It wasn't a flame. It was a blinding, unnatural glare. The ground didn't just shake, it tilted. The first wave was silent. The sound hadn't caught up yet. Everything within a 2-kilometer radius was pulverized instantly. A gray, swirling mass began to darken the capital. This cloud would hang over the city for days.
The Wanggongchang was gone. In its place, a massive crater.
But as the dust settled, the real nightmare began. Because what happened next was physically impossible.
When the roar finally died down, the silence was worse. Beijing didn't look like a city anymore. It looked like a graveyard. Within the 2-kilometer radius, everything was reduced to splinters. But as the dust settled, the survivors noticed something wrong. This is where the Wanggongchang incident enters the realm of the impossible. Thousands of victims were found completely stripped of their clothing. Their hats, shoes, and robes were gone, but their bodies were untouched. Search parties later found these clothes draped over trees miles away. Modern physics struggles to explain this atmospheric vacuum. Even inside the Forbidden City, the blast's behavior was erratic. The Tiangqi emperor was eating breakfast when the world shook. He fled to a side hall, surviving only because of a lucky sprint. His attendants and servants were crushed in the room behind him. Then came the sky's secondary horror, the iron rain. For hours after the blast, objects fell from the heavens. Not just timber and stone, but human remains. Severed arms and heads rained down on the Xuanwu district. Massive stone lions were reportedly catapulted far from their original gates. The official records describe it as a holy fire. They were recording things they didn't have the language to explain. People miles away reported being tossed like leaves by a cold wind. There was no heat in this secondary wave, just raw, kinetic energy. The bark of every tree in the district was peeled off instantly. Was this just a gunpowder explosion or a rare meteorological event? To the survivors, the message was clear. The mandate of heaven had been revoked. The blast didn't just break the city, it broke the dynasty's spirit. From this moment, the clock began to tick for the Ming Empire. But before the collapse, the survivors had to ask, how? It's time to weigh the theories. 4 centuries later, we are left with 3 distinct possibilities. The most straightforward answer is the one recorded by the Ming, an accident. Gunpowder is notoriously unstable. One spark in a maze of neglect could be enough. But there is a mathematical problem. Even the largest estimates of the stockpile struggle to account for the observed blast radius. Black powder doesn't detonate, it burns rapidly. To get this force, you need a different fuel. This brings us to the seismic theory. Beijing sits on the active North China Plain fault system. Could a massive release of underground methane have triggered the explosion? If an earthquake released a pocket of natural gas, the armory became a pilot light. This would explain the earth groan and the rising temperatures. It also provides a better explanation for the pressure wave that stripped victims. But even a gas explosion leaves a specific forensic signature, which leads us to the most controversial theory, the cosmic event. A bolide, an exploding meteor, could perfectly mimic a tactical blast. It would explain the blinding white light and the silent shockwave. It would also explain why people felt cold wind rather than heat in some areas. Yet no fragments were ever found. No impact crater remains. If a meteor hit, it was a ghost that vanished upon arrival. Modern science has tried to simulate the event. The accident is the most supported by records, but the hardest to reconcile with physical evidence. The seismic theory fits the omens, but not the scale of the debris. And the cosmic theory is a perfect fit for the physics, but lacks physical proof. Could the truth be a combination of all 3? A disaster of this scale rarely has a single father. The dust from the Wanggongchang explosion eventually settled, but the emperor who survived the blast would never truly recover. The 20,000 dead were buried, but the political fallout was just beginning. In the eyes of the people, the explosion was a celestial verdict. The mandate of heaven had been clearly, violently revoked. The dynasty was already fighting a losing war on the northern borders. The cost of the disaster drained an already empty imperial treasury. The internal rot, once hidden behind palace walls, was now visible to everyone. Wei Zhongshan, the architect of the rot, was dead within a year, forced to hang himself by the successor who inherited the ruin. Within 18 years, the Forbidden City would fall to a rebel army. The explosion wasn't the cause of the fall, but it was the final warning. Today, the site of the apocalypse is a maze of quiet residential alleys. Commuters walk over the same ground where the sky once vanished. Most have forgotten the morning the world tilted on its axis. We may never know if it was a spark, a shift in the earth, or a visitor from the stars. But the Wanggongchang remains a haunting reminder of how fragile history truly is. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to be remembered. Beyond the theories, the physics, and the politics, there is the count. 20,000 names lost to the archives of the Ming. They were merchants, laborers, guards, and children, people who began their mourning with the same mundane hopes we have today. In Chinese tradition, white is the color of mourning. We can analyze the blast radius, but we can never measure the void it left behind. A city broken, a people silenced. We look back not just to solve a mystery, but to ensure that they are not forgotten in the ash.